Let me tell you something that every general, every defense minister, and every head of state on this planet is quietly studying right now. Not in a classroom, not in a war game simulation, not in a think tank paper, but in real time with real satellites, real wreckage, and real silence coming from people who are never silent. What happened to the Middle East recently is not just a news story. It is not just a geopolitical flashpoint. It is a signal, a cold, clear, unmistakable signal that the way human beings fight wars, the doctrine, the hardware, the strategy that the most powerful militaries on earth have bet everything on for the last 80 years may have just been shattered in a single night. And if you think this story is only about Israel and Iran, you are not paying close enough attention. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through will change the way you see every army, every tank, every defense budget, and every alliance on this earth. And the most important part, the part that answers the question every military commander in Washington, London, Beijing, and Moscow is asking right now, that comes later. Do not move. I have spent decades in uniform. I have planned operations in the dark, briefed presidents, and stood over maps where every arrow, every symbol, every line represented a human life. I have seen what happens when a mission goes wrong. I have seen what happens when the enemy does something you did not anticipate, something your doctrine never accounted for, something your technology was never designed to stop. I have seen the look on a commander's face when he realizes that the plan he trusted, the plan built on years of training, billions of dollars of equipment, and the absolute confidence of a superpower has just been undone in hours. That look is not anger. It is not confusion. It is something far more dangerous. It is the moment a man realizes that everything he thought he knew may have been wrong. That is the look on a lot of faces right now, and you need to understand why. Let us begin with what we know. What we know, based on satellite imagery reviewed by independent European defense analysis firms, statements from regional intelligence sources, and the revealing silence of the Israeli Defense Forces themselves, is this. A coordinated Iranian strike, combining aerial drone swarms launched from multiple countries simultaneously, and concealed ground-based precision anti-tank missile systems activated across the Lebanese border and the Syrian corridor, targeted Israeli armored columns in northern Israel and the Golan Heights region. The strike was layered. The strike was synchronized. And the strike appears to have caused destruction of Israeli armored vehicles on a scale this region has not witnessed in 50 years. Iran's state media has claimed the complete destruction of multiple Israeli armored brigades. The Israeli government has not confirmed those numbers. But here is what the Israeli government also has not done. It has not denied them. And in 40 years of studying military communications at the highest levels, I can tell you with absolute certainty, when a military as proud, as capable, and as publicly confident as the Israel Defense Forces goes quiet, something serious has happened. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is confirmation wrapped in protocol. Now, before we go any further, I need you to do something that is harder than it sounds. I need you to set aside what you think you know. Set aside the headlines. Set aside the political allegiances. Set aside the instinct to root for a side. Because what I am about to describe to you is not a story about who is right and who is wrong. It is a story about physics, about engineering, about the cold, indifferent mathematics of warfare. And the mathematics right now are telling the story that no amount of political spin can rewrite. The weapons that appear to have torn through Israel's armored columns did not care about flags. They did not care about alliances. They cared only about velocity, trajectory, and the vulnerability of a steel hull to a shaped-charge warhead moving at the right angle, at the right moment, in the right sequence. And that sequence, that terrible, precise, patient sequence, is what we are here to examine. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you have to understand what was lost, or what Iran claims was lost. You cannot grasp the strategic earthquake unless you first understand the ground it shook. The Merkava Mark IV is not simply a battle tank. It is a monument to national trauma turned into national resolve. After the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when Egyptian forces armed with Soviet-supplied Sagar anti-tank missiles destroyed hundreds of Israeli tanks in the Sinai Desert and nearly broke the IDF's backbone in the opening days of the conflict, Israel made a decision that would define its military identity for the next half-century. Never again would Israeli soldiers die because their equipment was inadequate. Never again would the state of Israel find itself outgunned by a weapons technology it had failed to anticipate. So they built their own tank, from scratch, with Israeli engineers, Israeli doctrine, Israeli lessons written in Israeli blood. They built the Merkava. And then, driven by the same relentless determination that defines everything Israel does in the arena of national security, they built a better one. And then, a better one still. The Merkava Mark IV, the current backbone of Israel's armored corps, is not just the best tank Israel has ever built. It is, by the assessment of nearly every major NATO military and independent defense analysis organization on Earth, the most soldier-survivable main battle tank ever constructed. Its armor configuration is unique. Unlike most tanks, which place the engine at the rear, the Merkava positions its engine at the front of the hull, a deliberate design choice that creates an additional layer of protection for the crew compartment behind it. Its composite armor is layered and modular. Its fire control systems are among the most advanced in the world. It carries a 120-millimeter smoothbore cannon capable of firing a range of ammunition, including guided missiles. It can carry infantry soldiers in its rear compartment, a feature no other main battle tank in operation possesses, allowing it to function simultaneously as a fighting vehicle and a protected transport. And it is equipped with a Trophy Active Protection System, an Israeli-developed technological achievement that represents perhaps the single greatest leap forward in tank survivability since the invention of composite armor itself. The Trophy system uses radar to detect incoming missiles and rockets, calculates their trajectory in milliseconds, and fires a shotgun-like burst of projectiles to destroy the threat in the air before it reaches the vehicle. Israel has used Trophy in combat. It has worked. It has saved lives. It has stopped anti-tank missiles fired at close range in real engagements with real soldiers inside those hulls. The system has been so effective that the United States Army adopted a version of it for its own Abrams tanks. That is how good it was considered to be. And tonight, it appears it may not have been enough. Each Merkava Mark IV cost approximately $11 million. When you factor in the full complement of Israel's armored force, the additional NAMER armored personnel carriers, the self-propelled artillery platforms, the engineering and support vehicles that operate alongside the main battle tanks in combined arms formations, you are looking at a fleet whose total replacement value approaches, and by some credible estimates, exceeds $4 billion. That is the force Iran says it hit. That is the force the satellite imagery suggests was struck in multiple locations simultaneously. And that is the force whose silence from the battlefield, that terrible absence of communication that families across Israel are feeling as a physical weight in their chests right now, is telling the world something that no official statement has yet been willing to say directly. But here is what you need to understand about that silence and about the weapon that appears to have caused it, because this is where the story shifts from a regional military crisis into something far larger, something that touches every nation on Earth that has ever relied on armored steel as the foundation of its ground force. The weapons system that appears to have been most effective in this strike is one that Western military establishments were cautioning themselves not to underestimate as recently as 18 months ago, and which some voices within those establishments were still dismissing as overhyped. The Shahed series of Iranian-designed loitering munitions, what journalists have taken to calling kamikaze drones, has been in operational deployment since at least 2019. The world watched a version of this weapon devastate Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure at Abqaiq and Khurais in September of that year. The world watched variants of it be employed extensively in the conflict in Ukraine. And with each deployment, Iranian engineers watched too. They watched what worked, and what didn't. They watched how defensive systems responded. They watched the timing, the angles, the countermeasures, and they went back to their drawing boards and facilities that even the most sophisticated Western and Israeli intelligence assets have been unable to fully locate or map, and they built something better. The versions believed to have been used in this operation are assessed to carry dual-purpose warheads. Let me explain what that means in plain terms, because the engineering behind it is both elegant and devastating. The first charge in the warhead is designed not to destroy the tank. It is designed to blind it, to defeat the trophy active protection system by triggering it, forcing it to expend its interceptor burst on the first impact, depleting the system's capacity to respond to a follow-on strike in that same attack sequence. The second charge, arriving milliseconds later on the same trajectory, is a shaped charge penetrator, and it arrives at a hull that no longer has its shield. The trophy system, which has performed with documented success against single-shot anti-tank missiles in prior engagements, was apparently not programmed and may not have had the processing speed to handle this two-strike sequential approach when delivered simultaneously across dozens or hundreds of vehicles at a volume and tempo that overwhelmed the defensive architecture entirely. Defense engineers have written about this theoretical vulnerability in academic journals for years. War game scenarios have modeled it. Classified assessments within multiple NATO militaries have flagged it. Tonight, it left the pages of those papers and arrived on a battlefield in the Middle East. And the tanks that were supposed to be virtually impenetrable found out in the worst possible way that virtually is not the same word as actually. What comes next in this story will challenge something far bigger than Israel's military doctrine. It will challenge yours. Stay with me. Let us talk about the architecture of the attack itself, because the tactical execution is as significant as the technology. At approximately 2 a.m. local time, radar systems across northern Israel and the occupied Golan Heights activated simultaneously. Not a single signal, not a cluster. Hundreds of slow-moving aerial contacts rising from multiple launch points across Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon at the same time. A coordinated drone swarm unlike anything seen in real-world combat at this scale. Israel's layered air defense network, the Arrow system, designed to intercept ballistic missiles at high altitude, the David Sling, designed for medium-range threats, and the Iron Dome, optimized for short-range rockets and artillery, activated immediately. Intercepts began. Explosions illuminated the pre-dawn sky across multiple sectors, and for the first 20 minutes, the system appeared to be working. Israel's air defense architecture was doing precisely what it had been designed, funded, trained, and trusted to do. It was holding. And then the second wave arrived, not from above, from the ground, hidden in plain sight across the Lebanese border and the Syrian corridor, concealed within civilian infrastructure, dormant for months, possibly years. Iranian-backed proxy forces activated short-range precision anti-tank missile systems in a simultaneous volley across multiple firing positions. The aerial swarm had not been the main effort. The aerial swarm had been the distraction. Its purpose was not mass destruction from above. Its purpose was to force every Israeli radar operator, every air defense battery crew, every sensor fusion analyst, and every command center to look up, to orient their systems upward, to commit their processing capacity, their interceptor inventory, and their cognitive attention to the sky. And while they were looking up, the blade came in low, fast, and from the ground, aimed directly at the armored columns that represent Israel's ground warfare backbone. The timing was not a coincidence. The timing was the entire plan. This was not a strike conceived in weeks or months. The synchronization, the deception layer, the pre-positioned ground assets, the multi-country coordination, the deliberate exploitation of Trophy's sequential vulnerability. This was a plan conceived, developed, rehearsed, and executed over years, possibly over a decade. Iran did not attack in anger. Iran attacked on schedule. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it is one of the most important sentences in this entire story. Iran did not attack in anger. Iran attacked on schedule. In my experience, and I have spent a career studying how nations prepare for and execute conflict, the most dangerous military actions are never the reactive ones. The reactive strike is emotional. It is often poorly coordinated. It is driven by pride or desperation, and pride and desperation make mistakes. The most dangerous military action is the one that was planned in cold blood, executed with patience, and timed not to the moment of maximum emotion, but to the moment of maximum effect. What Iran appears to have executed was not an emotional response. It was the culmination of an 18-year investment in a single strategic idea. You do not need to outbuild your enemy's armor. You need to outthink it. Since the 2006 Lebanon war, when Hezbollah fighters armed with Iranian-supplied Kornet anti-tank missiles destroyed dozens of Merkava tanks and shocked the Israeli military establishment into a painful period of strategic self-examination, Tehran has been building toward this moment with a consistency and a patience that Western intelligence agencies have repeatedly underestimated. The lesson Iran absorbed from 2006 was the mirror image of the lesson Israel had absorbed from 1973. In 1973, Israel learned, never be caught with the wrong equipment. In 2006, Iran learned, you do not need better equipment. You need smarter employment of cheaper equipment at greater volume. You need weapons that cost a fraction of what they destroy. You need a production capacity your enemy cannot deplete. You need an attack profile your enemy's defenses were not designed to handle. And you need time. Iran had all of it. They transferred technology to Hezbollah. They transferred it to the Houthi movement in Yemen, who used it to strike Saudi oil infrastructure and later to threaten Red Sea shipping. They transferred it to Iraqi militia groups. They transferred it to Syrian-based proxies. They built quietly and methodically over nearly 2 decades a distributed anti-armor network stretching across the entire geographic width of the Middle East. Thousands of launch platforms, thousands of operators, thousands of missiles and drones, pre-positioned, maintained, upgraded, a web of lethal capability that no single airstrike or intelligence operation could fully neutralize, because it was never concentrated in one place. It was everywhere. And on the night of this operation, everywhere fired at once. Now, I need you to understand something about what this means beyond this particular conflict, because if you think the implications stop at the borders of Israel and Iran, you have not yet grasped the depth of the earthquake that just occurred. And what I am about to tell you, what the generals reading their classified briefings right now already know, is the part of this story that should keep every defense planner on Earth awake tonight. The United States Army has approximately 2,500 M1 Abrams main battle tanks in active service. When you include pre-positioned stocks, National Guard formations, and reserve inventories, that number climbs considerably higher. The Abrams is an extraordinary machine. It has been continuously upgraded since its introduction in 1980. It carries composite armor of a classified configuration that the Army has never fully disclosed. It is equipped with a 120mm smoothbore cannon, a gas turbine engine that produces 1,500 horsepower, and one of the most sophisticated fire control systems ever installed in a ground combat vehicle. It cost approximately $10 million per unit in its most current variant. And as of the night Iran executed this operation, the United States Army was in the process of retrofitting a version of the same trophy active protection system, the system that Israel pioneered, the system that was just apparently defeated in sequential dual strike engagements, onto the very tanks that form the centerpiece of American ground force doctrine. That is not a coincidence. That is a warning. And if you are not feeling the weight of that warning yet, let me give you a comparison that will make it impossible to ignore. On the 10th of December 1941, 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor had already shaken the foundations of American military confidence, the British Royal Navy dispatched 2 of its most powerful warships to intercept a Japanese invasion force off the coast of Malaya. HMS Prince of Wales was one of the most modern battleships afloat. It had carried Winston Churchill across the Atlantic to meet Franklin Roosevelt. It was the pride of the Royal Navy. HMS Repulse was a battle cruiser of enormous firepower and reputation. Together, they represented what the British Admiralty genuinely believed to be an invincible surface force, capable of deterring any Japanese naval action in the region by their presence alone. No aircraft carrier accompanied them because the admiral in command believed that land-based air cover would be sufficient. In less than 2 hours, Japanese torpedo bombers sent both ships to the bottom of the South China Sea. 840 sailors died, and with them died something far larger than 2 warships. They took with them an entire era of naval warfare. Before that day, every admiral in every navy on Earth understood that the battleship was the supreme instrument of naval power. After that day, they understood that the aircraft carrier, the vessel that projected air power across the water, had replaced it forever. The age of the battleship ended not with a debate in a naval college. It ended with fire and water and 840 men who never came home. The question that every military commander on Earth is asking right now, in language that is deliberately careful and professionally measured, but underneath which there is genuine alarm, is this. Is tonight the tank's December 10th, 1941? Is the armored column the new battleship? And is the drone swarm the new carrier-based aircraft? I will not pretend the answer is simple. It is not. But I will tell you this. The fact that the question is being asked urgently at the highest levels of every major military on Earth is itself the most significant strategic development of this decade. NATO's eastern flank, Poland, Romania, the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, is defended in large part by armored formations. American heavy brigades pre-positioned in Europe, German Leopard 2 tanks, British Challenger 2s, Polish PT-91s. The entire Eastern defensive architecture that NATO has spent the last decade reinforcing in response to Russian aggression is built on the same foundational assumption that Israel built its ground force doctrine on, that heavy armor, well-trained crews, and technological superiority in active protection will hold the line against any adversary willing to contest it. Russia, which has now watched its own armored forces suffer catastrophic attrition in Ukraine, losing by credible estimates over 2,000 tanks in 3 years of grinding combat, many of them to exactly the kind of inexpensive drone-delivered munitions that Iran appears to have employed against Israel, has been absorbing the same lesson from the other side of the equation. Moscow has watched. Moscow has recalculated. And Moscow, for all of its tactical failures in Ukraine, has one strategic lesson now burned into its doctrine with absolute clarity. Cheap, mass-produced, precision-guided aerial munitions can destroy expensive, sophisticated armored vehicles at a ratio that is economically and strategically unsustainable for the side fielding the armor. That is not a hypothesis anymore. That is a documented, battlefield-verified fact. And Iran just demonstrated it at a scale and with a level of coordination that Ukraine never achieved. China has been watching too. Do not for a single moment believe otherwise. The People's Liberation Army has invested heavily in drone warfare capability. Its loitering munition programs are extensive, classified, and advancing rapidly. Taiwan's defense, which relies significantly on ground force resistance using armored assets to contest any amphibious landing, is being studied with fresh urgency in Taipei tonight. The implications of what Iran did are not regional, they are global. Every military on Earth that has organized its ground force around the primacy of the armored column is now sitting in front of the same hard question. And that question does not have a comfortable answer yet. Let me tell you what I know about hard questions without comfortable answers. I know them personally. I have sat in rooms where the options on the table were all bad and the mission still had to proceed. I have planned operations where the margin between success and catastrophe was measured not in miles, but in seconds. And I have learned over a lifetime in uniform that the most dangerous thing a military organization can do in the face of a hard question is pretend that the question is not as hard as it is. The most dangerous thing a nation can do when confronted with evidence that its doctrine has been defeated is find reasons to believe that the defeat was a fluke, an anomaly, a product of unique circumstances that will never repeat, because they always repeat. The armies that survive paradigm shifts in warfare are not the ones with the most hardware. They are the ones with the most honest self-assessment. The ones willing to look at the burning wreckage and say, plainly and without ego, this changes things. We have to adapt. We have to move faster than our adversary adapts next. That capacity for honest self-confrontation, that institutional courage to admit that what worked yesterday may kill you tomorrow, is the most important quality any military can possess. And right now, that quality is being tested in every defense ministry on earth simultaneously. Now let us turn to what Israel faces in the immediate aftermath, because Israel's strategic situation in the coming 72 hours is among the most complex and consequential decision environments any government has faced in the modern era. And I say that not for dramatic effect. I say it because it is precisely factually true. Israel has three broad strategic options available. None of them are without severe cost. None of them are without genuine risk. And the one Israel chooses in the next 3 days will define not just this conflict, but the regional order of the Middle East for the next generation. The first option is full escalation, a massive retaliatory strike directly on Iranian territory, targeting missile production facilities, drone manufacturing plants, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command infrastructure, and the underground facilities that have been the engine of Iran's anti-armor weapons development for the past 2 decades. The argument for this option is straightforward and emotionally compelling. Deterrence demands response. A nation that absorbs a strike of this magnitude and does not strike back with overwhelming force signals to every adversary in every theater that its red lines are negotiable, that its pain threshold can be exceeded without terminal consequence. For Israel, whose entire security architecture is built on the credibility of its deterrent posture, the perception of weakness is not merely embarrassing, it is existentially dangerous in a neighborhood where every potential adversary is calculating whether today is the day to test the limits. The argument against full escalation is equally compelling and considerably more sobering. Iran is not a tactical target. It is a nation of 90 million people with a military that has been preparing for exactly this kind of retaliatory scenario for decades. Its air defense systems, while not equivalent to Israel's, are substantial. More critically, a direct Israeli strike on Iranian territory activates the full weight of Iran's proxy network simultaneously. Hezbollah, with an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at Israeli cities from southern Lebanon, would have both the justification and the instruction to fire. Houthi forces in Yemen, who have already demonstrated the reach to strike Israeli territory, would escalate their campaign. Iraqi militia groups would activate. Israel would face simultaneous, multi-front missile barrages from multiple directions, while its armored ground force capacity, the force designed to deter and repel ground incursions, has just been significantly degraded. The United States would face a decision of its own: watch an ally fight for its survival against a coalition of adversaries, or intervene directly in a war that no American president campaigned on and no American public has prepared for.